This Simon line time-lapse brings a lot of firsts for MVP. It's the first Simon line disc. It's their first 12-speed disc in their lineup. It might be the first like domey driver for them. It's their first custom line in their Axiom line. And it's the first disc that's sold for this price, which we're gonna talk about that. But this new time-lapse really surprised me because in some ways it was kind of what I expected it to be, but in some ways it wasn't. Because just from hearing from Simon, it's basically like their destroyer type disc. That's I think what he was going for with this. And he mentioned how this was just a very like bomber disc for pros and kind of like a disc that just about anyone can use. Looking at the profile, it's very reminiscent of a destroyer. It has like a sharp rim and it has like pretty wide rim, but it's not nearly as wide as their higher end speed discs, like their 13 and 14 speeds. Because before this, MVP really only had like 13 and 14 speed drivers for like the pros, and those have massive rims on them. But not only that, like they're kind of known for being shallow, which this, it's not deep by any means. I think it has a good depth to the rim, but it's definitely not as shallow as most of their other stuff. So if you don't like their drivers because of how shallow they are, this might actually be a welcome change for their discs, because the depth is like it's pretty similar to a destroyer. And even like the dome, it has like a slight dome to the disc the whole way across it, which I think this might be the first domey disc in their lineup. Like I wouldn't consider it domey by any means, but compared to most of their other drivers, they're known for having like very flat discs. So compared to those, this definitely has a dome to it. Like this has a very destroyer-esque shape to it. Like I would say it's a little bit more concaved on the bottom of the rim than a destroyer is, and it comes into like a much sharper edge than the destroyer does, but it feels very, very similar in the hand, just a touch sharper than it. The reason this surprised me in some ways and not in others is that like Simon said that this would be like a bomber disc for pros and like a good distance driver for most players. But when I look at it, this looks like not just a destroyer, but it looks like an overstable destroyer. Like I have this like 4-time destroyer with me and it looks very similar in terms of the dome. This one looks a little bit meaner, but it does not look like a workable destroyer to me. So we basically got like two ends of the spectrum, like kind of what Simon said it would be, but then also kind of what I think it's gonna be based on the shape. So because Simon said this would be a good driver for a lot of arm speeds, I'm gonna throw this and compare it to like similar 12-speed, slightly overstable drivers from other companies. But I'm also gonna compare it side by side to like my Halo Wraith and also the ZENITH, because the ZENITH is like similar numbers but just an 11-speed, and kind of see how this stacks up for my arm speed. But also I also brought my friend Wes, and he's gonna throw it with his discs, and he like has the proper arm speed to throw 12-speed discs to kind of see how this fares for both of our arm speeds. So if you've seen my other reviews on 12-speed or 13-speed drivers, you kind of know my opinion on them. And it's that like you should really be throwing what suits your arm speed best. So even if like a high-speed driver is like understable enough for you, like it really doesn't matter. It's just the speed that matters. And I kind of stay by that still, because going off of what Simon said, this doesn't fly like I would expect it to fly, at least what he said when they were first announced. But it flies very much like I'd expected it to looking at the profile. It's just a very overstable destroyer type disc. Now it still has a lot of glide, it still went a decent ways, and it was very comparable to my 4-time destroyer here. So just fast, has some glide, but then hooks up at the end. But I know the numbers I think has it say a little bit of turn, which I didn't see that in this. Even when I had Wes throw him, and he was throwing these like 450 feet on a hyzer, and they just didn't really turn at all. Even the 4-time destroyer, he would throw it on a hyzer and it would like, you could see it, notice it pop up just a little bit, but it still held the hyzer the whole way. And even like the Warbird here, we were throwing it with this. This is pretty beefy for like a destroyer type disc. But even this one like popped up a touch. Like if I were to put the stabilities here, these are all still pretty overstable. I would put them like this, like the 4-time destroyer on the bottom, then the Warbird just a tick more overstable, then the Simon line is the most overstable out of these. Now I wouldn't put it like a tilt type overstability for 12 speeds. It definitely still fits into that like destroyer type slot for like pro level arms. So for those who have bigger arm speeds, like would be a great disc that you can just trust and rip on, still get a decent distance down the fairway, and then just trust that it's gonna fight the winds or hook left for you at the end. And for forehands, this would be great for someone who can just smash forehands and like overstable discs for that. This would be an awesome disc. And this is a great disc for those who like have wanted to try MVP or Axiom and haven't loved their shallower stuff. This is like it feels like a normal disc, if that makes sense. But that's mainly for those who have a big arm and can throw these like over 425, 450. But what about like other AMs? Like I throw like anywhere between like 360 and 380 depending on the day. What about for me? Because Simon said that this would be a great disc for just about any player. Maybe, kind of. This was just very difficult for me to throw. Like I have to throw it like perfectly or throw it really hard to get any sort of distance on it. And it just like hooks up for me. For some people, they might like that. They might like a disc and just have something just hook up and not go super far, maybe skip a lot. But for me, like my Halo Wraith here, it gave me very similar lines. It might've been a touch straighter, but it was a lot easier to throw and just more consistently. This would go farther than the Simon line here. There are some situations where I would put this in my bag, which we'll get to, but for the most part, throwing the slower discs, like this Halo Wraith, for example, or even like I brought out the ZENITH from the James CONRAD line. This is an 11 speed, and it has similar numbers to the Simon line Time-Lapse, but this one actually flies like the numbers. And these just were much easier for me to get up to speed and get them to fly properly, because it's not just like the arm speed, it's also like the angles, the nose angle it likes to be at. The higher the speed, the more sensitive it is to those different angles and the form. So my form is just kind of maxed out at this 11 speed type disc. But the one reason I would put this in the bag is the same reason why I occasionally put the destroyers in my bag, and that is for windy situations. Now, not all faster discs that act overstable for you are great for winds. Like for example, this Cloud Breaker, like for me and for people who throw slower than me, this won't turn and just hook up with no wind. And that would be deceiving. And you would think that that would work in high winds, but high winds basically mimics a faster arm speed with less spin on the disc. So that would cause more turn than it would just having that faster arm speed. So although this might not turn for slower arm speeds, when you add heavier winds, this will turn because it's meant to turn at higher arm speeds. These don't turn very much, if at all, even for higher arm speed players. So for slower arm speed players, once the winds get above like 30 miles per hour, that's when I would lean towards and put something like this in the bag, because then I can trust it and it would fly, and it would give me a similar flight to my Halo Wraith, but it would do that in like 30, 35, 40 mile per hour winds. But without those, I don't know if I would find a place for this in my bag that would not be able to be covered by like an overstable Gray/Wraith, or disking down to like a Firebird for even more overstability. But it might for you. And I think these prototypes are gonna be more overstable than the stock runs, at least that's what I hear. So maybe the stock runs will have a little bit more workability for higher arm speeds and even for lower arm speeds, but we'll see. But right now, all we've got are these for like $40, which these are $39.95. That is like the lowest that MVP allows them to go. And a lot of people think that that's like going to be the Simon line discs are going to be all $40. No, that's only because this is a first run prototype. Like they did not run a whole lot of prototypes, which is misleading because some other companies like Innova or even like Discraft with the Athena, for example, they had test flights or prototypes, but they made like thousands of them of just the prototypes. So like anyone can get prototypes, and even then people were upset about it, but like they didn't make a ton of prototypes, and because of that, they priced it higher. So whether you like it or not, like that's gonna be it, and I mean it's gonna sell. So, but I'm sure these stock runs of these, they're not gonna be $40. We did get 10 of these, and this is one of them, so there's 9 left. And I mean, there's probably not left. If you've gotten this far in the video and haven't gone to my site, they're probably gone. But even if you didn't get the time lapse, I also got the signature waves that they did a run of for his D-Glow win. So I've got some of those at the site, as well as like just a restock of MVP in general. So if you want to check that out, the link below and also on the screen here by the end of the video. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.